There's a corner of history where Portsmouth were the best team arguably in world football, two-time champions of England as the 40s became the 50s. Then there's a more familiar version of Pompey, barrelling towards bankruptcy afterwards. Today we cover both. This is the rise and fall of Portsmouth FC. Football came to Frogtown on April 5th, 1898 when a bunch of lads met at number 12 High Street and agreed to buy 5 acres of land just off of Goldsmith Avenue. They'd seen those heathens at nearby Southampton flourish with their participation in the Southern League and fancied a bit of that. Cut to 1902 and they've just won the Southern League for the first time. This hardly a poor division considering Portsmouth had to beat the reigning FA Cup holders Tottenham Hotspur to the title. And yet, Pompey wouldn't get their Football League bow until after the war and the great expansion of 1920. Situated in a hurriedly repurposed 3rd Division South, the club would be the first of the new influx of teams to breach the top flight. Billy Haynes formed the bedrock of the club's promotion from the 3rd tier in 1924 and simply went to another level by the time of the 26-27 campaign. He bagged himself 40 goals as one of the tightest promotion races was settled between Pompey and Manchester City on the final day of the season. Middlesbrough had already gone up as champions well in advance of Portsmouth's welcoming of Preston North End and City's hosting of the already relegated Bradford City. With two teams going up, Pompey and City could only be split by goal average. Portsmouth roared to a 4-1 lead, seemingly assured of their own promotion. Then news was fetched from Main Road. City had thoroughly pumped Bradford 8-0. Kicking off 15 minutes later, Pompey needed just one more goal. Who else but Billy Haynes, 4 for the day, 40th of the season, as Pompey earned promotion to the big time by 0.006 of a single goal. With the arrival of the First Division, Jack Tin was appointed as manager, and the best compliment you could pay him was that Portsmouth became part of the furniture before football was suspended in lieu of war. Those arbitrary positions, though, didn't tell the full story. That's the famous Twin Towers of Wembley Stadium, not just once or twice but thrice, as Pompey ensured it was 3rd time lucky before the sport was postponed for half a decade. Bolton had their number in 1929 thanks largely in part to Tommy Bell's injury, which rendered Pompey effectively down to 10. 5 years later, Manchester City gained ample revenge for the great promotion battle of 1927, Portsmouth again suffering injury when captain Jimmy Allen went down with concussion. But 10 years after their first visit, the Pompey chimes were out again, as not a single goal was conceded across 4 home ties before Highbury was the venue for the Fratton Club's dispatching of Huddersfield in the semi-finals. This time without injury, goals from Bert Barlow, John Anderson, not the ref from the 90s hit TV show Gladiators, and a brace from Cliff Parker finally won the cup. It was to be the last great day for quite some time, not just in Portsmouth's football history, but in any kind of football history. I think I'm safe in saying that no club will ever hold on to the FA Cup for as long as Portsmouth did. They held on to the trophy for 7 long years, but in reality, that defence ended at the first possible opportunity with a defeat against Birmingham City in the January of 1946. Old Jackie Tin had been busy during the war, and the formulation of a scouting network had unearthed prizes as shiny as Dougie Reid at a snip at $7,500 from Stockport County. A return to organised league football in the autumn of 46 had been an unmitigated disaster, as Pompey marked the first footballing Christmas in almost a decade with 2 losses to Arsenal, which left them bottom of the pile on Boxing Day. Thankfully, there wasn't the fear-mongering of being bottom at Christmas just yet, and thankfully Ernie Butler had earned himself the Pompey goalkeeper's jersey, one that he would keep for quite some time. There's that scouting network working overdrive again. 5 wins in 20 matches up to Boxing Day gratefully became 9 from their last 22, earning them the safety of mid-table. Just another season of Portsmouth in the top flight, minimal mid-table fuss. Then the potential wrecking ball flung itself through the Fratton end. Jack Tin had retired. In his place, the lineage of his good work continued through Chief Scout Bowtie Bob Jackson. Bet you can't guess where he got that fucking nickname from. Either way, the club was in rude health, and it was partly due to him, not just the manager. Winning 6 of their first 9 didn't derail matters. A 6-0 thrashing of Sheffield United, the pick of the bunch, whilst a strong Liverpool team were also defeated at Fratton Park in mid-September. The new manager continued to work his magic on the transfer front, acquiring Ike Clark in November amid a poor run of form, whilst Jimmy McAlinden would be a notable departure, more on him in a little bit. Whilst Clark was able to bag a goal on his debut in defeat to Aston Villa, the frontman wouldn't become prolific just yet. Meanwhile, it was the springtime acquisition of Albert Juliusson from Dundee that proved the bigger profit. He swaggered into the Pompey blue, netting a hat-trick in a 6-1 thrashing of Middlesbrough in April, and would amount to a similar amount of goals as Clark, but in far fewer outings. One would go on to be a club legend, the other wouldn't make it beyond the 1947-48 season. Yep, that was Julianson leaving, sent on his way up to Goodison Park by August, disillusioned by the regimented training down on the south coast, whilst Clark stood the test of time. Again, it was another season of relaxation in mid-table. The club won 3 more games, conceded 16 fewer goals, and earned themselves 4 more points, i.e. just another season of Portsmouth FC. Despite the minor improvement, nobody envisioned what was to come. Even history was against Portsmouth, outside of what looked to be an anomalous Arsenal run of 5 titles between 1930 and 38, built off the back of a Yorkshireman in Herbert Chapman nonetheless. No club who could consider themselves Southern had won a championship. Then again, Arsenal were currently reigning for a 6th time. Perhaps this was the era where a Northern-led dominance would be over. After an existential crisis about players striking over wages, the season commenced on August 21st with nothing much out of the ordinary, a 2-2 draw up at Preston. Then came the flood, 4-0 in front of their own fans against Everton, and even better 5-0 back at their place the following week, whilst the likes of Burnley, Stoke, Middlesbrough, Charlton, Sheffield United, Newcastle and Sunderland were all crushed before mid-October. Pompey had yet to taste defeat. They were unlockable defensively, but still commanded just a 2-point lead over Derby County in second. A new challenger for a new decade revealed itself the following week, Stan Cullis's Wolves exacting Pompey's first defeat of the season in a damning 3-0 display. Consolation from the 39 Cup final, perhaps. Portsmouth would record just 2 wins in advance of Christmas Day, but it would be the first one which informed the remainder of the campaign. You see, after a 5-game winless run, Portsmouth were due to celebrate their golden jubilee, and in much simpler times, the club was allowed to commemorate this occasion by selecting a date and an opponent for it. They chose champions Arsenal. They chose November 27th, and goals from Jack Froggatt, Len Phillips, Bert Barlow and Ike Clark sealed it. The line in the sand was drawn. The title charge reignited. The season had changed. This one belonged to Portsmouth now. This year's Christmas doubleheader came against Chelsea, and they were slapped about twice before what would become known as a New Year's aberration took place up at Turf Moor. Then it was time for the resumption of the grandest, oldest football competition in existence, and a reaffirming 7-0 win over Stockport led into the springtime grinding out of results against Stoke, Charlton and Man City in the league, and Sheffield Wednesday in the Cup. Double dreams over, Portsmouth still kept a stranglehold on the destination of the Championship. Holding a crucial game in hand and a 3-point advantage over Newcastle United, they just had to avoid a self-destruction to get over the line. 10 matches remained, the first of which required a steady hand after racing into what would turn out to be an insurmountable 3-0 half-time lead against champions of 2 years prior, Liverpool, the second of which a midweek trip up north to title rivals Newcastle. All Portsmouth had to do was keep their heads, and they did, netting 5 times at St James's Park with 5 headers, 2 for Peter Harris, 3 for Jack Froggatt. The pendulum swung to Pompey. A loss at Blackpool partially undid that hard work, but Easter arrived, a notoriously king-making time of the year, with its home triumphs over Birmingham and Wolves, which declared Pompey ready for the Championship. And it could have been won on April the 18th given Newcastle's shock defeat against Middlesbrough, but Pompey were spineless at St Andrews, foregoing the title for now with a 3-0 loss. The same was required 5 days later, a win on the road plus favours. This time Pompey did their bit. Ike Clark and Peter Harris goals, overturning a Bolton lead at Burnden Park. Nearby, their rivals were both trailing. It didn't matter that Newcastle's Bobby Mitchell got an equaliser at Anfield or that Johnny Downey had done the same for Man United at Old Trafford against Preston. Portsmouth were officially champions of England. It's always harder to stay at the top of the mountain though, isn't it? And whilst there were blistering performances, just ask Borough, who shipped 5 in front of their own fans, and Everton, who once again suffered early torments against Pompey, the season never truly took off. It was a campaign of catch-up as Manchester United dumped Pompey out of the Cup 5th round, as the Charity Shield was shared with Wolves, and as trips to the Hawthorns, Blumfield Road and Turf Moor would end in defeat towards the back end of 1949. The Pompey players must have sat there after their cup elimination at Old Trafford and pondered what was left to do in the season. One quick glance at the table would have told them this was still a highly competitive league, or one of low quality, scratch out one according to your philosophy. To some extent, Pompey had attempted to buy their way into a settled team as a slew of injuries necessitated signings like Jimmy Stephen from Bradford Park Avenue. Even with cup elimination behind them, Pompey couldn't quite shake the cobwebs of their season. Defeats at Molineux and the baseball ground continuing the champions' inconsistencies. Still, the gap remains 6 points despite Portsmouth's position in 7th with 11 to play. History demanded it be a Man United, Liverpool or an Arsenal. Form demanded it was a Blackpool or a Sunderland or a Wolves. Portsmouth were the outsiders in their own title defence. What's worse, Jimmy Scowler had been sent off against Derby County. Park that one for the time being. We'll come back to it since automatic suspensions were some decades away and the next FA disciplinary hearing wasn't until April. 3 days later, Pompey got their show back on the road thanks to a comeback against Burnley and what had become a handy point on the road against Sunderland. To end March, Dougie Reid forced a hat-trick in against Chelsea. Gap down to 4 points, Portsmouth comforted themselves with a game in hand, a graduation to 5th and the fact that they still had to meet the leaders at Old Trafford. Peter Harris got the winner at Stoke. The points came easier against Fulham on Good Friday, the gap now down to 2 points. The game in hand remained, but still, Portsmouth couldn't say they had things in their own hands just yet, thanks to Sunderland's placing 3rd and a point ahead of them. But we should know by now, Easter is the kingmaker. Nobody is immune, even champions, as West Brom, still in a relegation battle, turned up and stole 2 points. Whilst Liverpool and Man United continued to flounder, Blackpool and Sunderland did not. Therefore, Portsmouth looked to have surrendered their championship. But hold on, Easter wasn't yet over. Cut to Monday, both points desperately won at Fulham to keep Pompey alive. Then the news from around the country piled in, each one more delicious than the last. Blackpool lost at home to Everton, Sunderland lost at Borough, Liverpool lost at Burnley and United sacrificed a point at Birmingham. Therefore, Portsmouth could be said to have exited Easter better than how they entered it. Still with that game in hand over the leaders, still with the visit of Old Trafford to come, but still with matters out of their hands due to Sunderland leading them by a point. And that trip to Old Trafford was next, mind-bogglingly double booked against a Scotland-England international at Hampden. Fortunately for both sides, they lost just one player apiece. Dougie Reid and Jack Froggatt with the goals in the final knock-ins in Manchester, well before Fergie time was even dreamt up. A good day got even better with the news that Sunderland had surrendered their lead against the other club from Manchester. Liverpool breaking in their special cup final kits were next at Fratton Park. They still held more than a chance of winning the title, but Portsmouth could end their double dreams as a contest with a win. Again, it was a late show from Pompey, Jack Froggatt, Dougie Reid with the goals, and once again the day was bettered by results from elsewhere, Man United and Sunderland both losing, whilst Blackpool were held at home to Chelsea. It was the perfect time then for a 10-day break, since Portsmouth's next opponents were eventual cup winners Arsenal. Pompey were safe in the knowledge that they would still be at the top come the trip to Highbury. In the meantime, Blackpool joined Man United and Sunderland in derailing their title ambitions. What's that? The FA bulldozing their way through with that belated disciplinary hearing. Yep, Jimmy Scowler was banned for the remaining 2 games. On a day which could have effectively sealed the title, Portsmouth surrendered to the cup holders. It gifted the neutral a tantalising 3-way fight for the championship 3 days later. Wolves needed a goal-scoring miracle at home to Birmingham if Portsmouth were to win at home to Aston Villa. Meanwhile, Sunderland waited in the wings at home to Chelsea should either team lose. They wouldn't, as 3 thrashings, 4-1, 5-1 and 6-1, all went in the favour of the contenders. Portsmouth had done it again, the first champions to be decided by goal average since Herbert Chapman's Huddersfield Town in 1924, the first champions to defend their crown since 1935, again down to Herbert Chapman, this time the Arsenal team that he built. It would be a feat only repeated twice in the next 26 years, the first due to a special team known as the Busby Babes, and the second owed partly to their perishing and partly due to Stan Cullis's genius at Molineux. Whilst they would get to sample the European Cup, Portsmouth sadly would never be given that honour. Welcome to the shambles part of the video, and I suppose I did promise more on Jimmy McAlinden. Oh, well, illegal payments to him after the war landed Pompey directors Vernon Stokes and Harry Wayne with suspensions which would ultimately last for almost the entirety of the 1950-51 campaign, which couldn't have gone any worse. Second tier Luton Town dumped Pompey out of the cup at the first available opportunity, and there was to be no powers of recovery in the league this time from Bowtie Bob's team. 13th on Christmas Day and 14 points off the surprising pace of Middlesbrough, they would only be able to close that down to a point from Arthur Rowe's brilliant eventual championship winning Spurs team. The 51-52 season, however, saw a mini resurgence as the club entered March with double aspirations still alive and well. The visit of Newcastle in the quarter-final of the Cup was next, 2 points the difference to league leaders Manchester United. Then just 3 wins from their final 12 matches condemned Portsmouth to what would become the new normal, mid-table mediocrity and no trips to Wembley. That was only confirmed when Bob Jackson upped and left as manager. You'd assume he'd be going to one of the all-time great clubs, wouldn't you? Wrong. Hull City was his next quite literal port of call. Former reserve coach and teacher Eddie Lever was next, a move designed to act as the next in the pipeline. In the end, the club plumbed new depths continually. 15th became 14th before the renaissance nobody saw coming, a half-arsed title bid in 55. Easter had just buggered off and Pompey were still in the mix, proof if it was needed that they were contenders. 6 points back, yes, but they had 2 games in hand and the visit of Chelsea was next. The title was in Portsmouth's hands once again. Not for long, a goalless 90 minutes at Fratton followed 3 more draws, derailing that particular title bid, and it would be the last Portsmouth would ever experience in the top flight at least. As the championship stars departed, the scouting network was arguably still working. Ray Crawford coming through the ranks and Derek Dugan being acquired. They'd somehow only managed 51 league games before Crawford left to win the league and star in a European Cup with Ipswich, and Dugan left to visit Wembley with teams like Blackburn and Wolves. Meanwhile, the arse fell out of it at Fratton Park. The lever pulled on lever before relegation could be confirmed to Division 2 in 1959. His successor Freddie Cox wouldn't make it to the end of the 60-61 campaign, where Portsmouth fell to yet another relegation. George Smith was able to steady the ship, earning promotion back to the second tier immediately. The 60s, whilst a cultural shift towards the colourful for the rest of the country, remained a monotonous beige for the supporters of Portsmouth. The era of the teenager up and down Britain, as George Smith simply deleted the reserve and youth teams at Fratton Park. A new tact was found in 1967 when they went 3 games with Hull City in the Cup's third round to see just how much money could be squeezed out out of attendances before ultimately elimination was found in the next round against Spurs. Fans were still flocking to Fratton to see players like Mike Treblico, as Pompey missed out on promotion in 1968 thanks to a stuttering final furlong. Upon returning to the grey middle ground, Smith somehow got himself a promotion as general manager, leaving the club in the hands of a tracksuit manager in Ron Tyndall. The club almost literally stood still for a decade, only finishing between 15th and 17th, making this graph look silly. Tyndall was given money to strengthen the squad, but the needle just could not be moved, not even by the 50k acquisition of Norman Piper. For now, excitement at Fratton Park was reserved for rare home cup draws against the Giants, Arsenal being an example in 1971. Despite the financial situation worsening with losses deepening from 50 grand to 90 grand, Pompey still was spent up. 50 more K going on Alan Stevenson and Peter Price in 72. Neither men worked, barely cobbling together 100 league appearances for the club. Enter 1973 and enter John Deacon. He entered the board, promising to prop the club up with the cash necessary to return to the top flight, whilst even going so far as to change the club's home colours to predominantly white. Losses crept into six figures. Ron Tyndall became John Mortimer, who became Ian St John. Acquisitions like Ken Foggo, Ron Davies and Peter Marinello would come through the door on big money, as every oscillation the club tried had them remaining unmoved.
In for Boyer, but handed well. Now Maguire coming in, and what a good goal from Mick. Flicked on for Galvin. Yeah! Here's Train. And it's 2-0, Billy Hughes.
That was until they finally circled the drain of relegation back to the third tier in 1976. They tried everything. The restoration of the reserve teams continued, big signings such as George Graham mixed in with the young stars of Steve Foster and Chris Kamara, all wasted on Portsmouth. By November 1976, the club had become reliant on their supporters raising thousands of pounds through sponsoring Fratton Park turf by the square footage. After nearly 3 years of being promised money, Ian St John was finally handed a player courtesy of a transfer fee. Get ready, £5,000 on Paul Gilchrist, a striker who would score 3 league goals in 39 matches. It just about summed it all up. Deacon sacked St John with the club on the verge of an unthinkable relegation to the 4th tier of English football after a 2-0 loss at Mansfield Town, which left them in the drop zone with 3 matches remaining. Jimmy Dickinson, a championship winner and Mr Portsmouth himself, on a record 764 league appearances, was enlisted as the caretaker manager. It was total desperation. But it worked. A draw at Preston and a 3-1 win over York confirmed Pompey's safety by the skin of the teeth. The one shining light in this hurricane of excrement was the free-scoring Dave Kemp, who by March 1978 saw enough writing on the wall to determine he needed to get the hell out of Fratton Park for his own sanity. He left behind a scoring record of 1 in 2 and a club who confirmed their freefall into the 4th division with a 2-0 home defeat to Oxford United on April the 4th, 1978. We're officially into the second half of our tour of British football. To see some of the other clubs we've visited so far, click on this playlist.